Welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live, and I'm Cyril Stober. It seemed far away, but suddenly it's at hand. The clock must have been ticking fast, right? And from the presidential and National Assembly election to another round of governorship and state assembly elections billed for Saturday, the 11th of March. Tonight, NTA Tuesday Live will look at preparations ahead of the nationwide exercise and how major stakeholders are playing their individual roles to ensure a seamless process come Saturday this week. But first, let's get to see this report by Adeni Taiwo.
The jury is out on the February 25 presidential and National Assembly elections, returning a verdict that returns APC Bola Ahmed Tinubu as the winner and president-elect. In the build-up to and while the exercise was going on, analysts sat here providing insight into the progress of key components of that poll. Now that the results are out, it is time to take a retrospective look at the exercise in its entirety. The deployment of beavers by INEC for accreditation and voting in the 2023 polls came with lot of excitement and expectations, especially with regards to the credibility of the exercise. However, observed cases of late commencement of voting and glitches suffered by the beavers at some polling units in Lagos State were major concerns for stakeholders.
If INEC logistics will be fast enough, then in every local government, no matter how big, collation at the second level can finish fast enough.
I believe it will not be too much for INEC to contract this logistic to logistic companies. We have a lot of them that can deliver right on time.
That Tinubu Bola Ahmed of the APC,
although he won the election with 8,794,726 total votes, the eventual winner, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, did not record an easy victory. Coming second place in his home state after Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi, analysts say it's a pointer to how fair the process was, despite glitches of the beavers in some areas.
It's proof that democracy is still, you can see practice democracy very well, that any party can win anywhere.
With a total vote cast of 1,335,729 out of about 6.2 million eligible voters that obtained their PVC in the state, the turnout of voters is low, but their peaceful conduct reduced the burden on agencies saddled with security management of the poll.
Lots and lots of them called these emergency numbers, and it helped us to identify trouble spots and give the much needed help.
Having broken the ice with the presidential and National Assembly elections, the parameters are expected to check out better at the gubernatorial and state assembly elections with better preparations from INEC and other relevant agencies. In Lagos, Adeni Taiwo.
All right, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's introduce our guests. We'd like to welcome to this program Nick Dazang is a former Director of Voter Education and Publicity of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. Nick, it's good to see you as always.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Let me also welcome to this program Dr. Mukhtar Imam, Dean, Faculty of Communication Management and Social Sciences, Penn Resource University, Gombe. Thanks for being with us tonight.
My pleasure.
Right. And we're also joined tonight by Paul James, Yaga Africa. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you for the invitation.
Well, as you already know, at some point in time, this program would be interactive. It means you can join in the discussion in the studio. But when it is that time, we'll remind you of the procedure and the process. For now, let's settle down to the issues at stake. The governorship and state assembly elections would be on Saturday. Some 28 states will be having their governorship election. But let's start off by looking at what has led up to this. And just about 2 weeks ago, we all witnessed the presidential and National Assembly polls. Now, so many things arose from those elections, which would be reflecting on what's happening on Saturday. But let's quickly get your assessment of it, Nick.
Well, thank you very much. For me, the first set of elections, the presidential election and the National Assembly elections, were framed by a number of challenges. And leading up to the conduct of the elections, one of the challenges was that of insecurity that was heightened up to October last year. And then the security agencies were able to bring it down, but it still lingered up to the conduct of the elections. And then we also had the cash crunch occasioned by the redesign of the Naira. And then we also had fuel scarcity. Now, in spite of that, the elections held, but there were challenges with the elections. The challenges arose principally based on the two pillars on which they were supposed to rest. The first is that the elections were supposed to be conducted using the bimodal voter accreditation system, which was supposed to verify and accredit voters. There were so many glitches with the beavers, some of which were addressed timeously, some of which were not addressed timeously. But the other pillar on which the elections rested, which was the upload of the polling unit results, on the INEC results viewing portal, literally collapsed. And compounding this collapse was the fact that, the commission itself was not forthcoming. The conducting elections, as we all know, puts you in a crisis mode. And in a crisis mode, the thing to do is to be upfront with information. If you have challenges, you come out and say, I have this challenge. And for more than 2 or 3 election cycles, INEC has been able to earn the trust of Nigerians based on the fact that it has escalated its transparency. Almost all its processes, except the very act of casting your vote in the cubicle, is done openly, from its procurement processes to its all engagements with stakeholders and so on are done openly. So the fact that INEC did not communicate its challenges in time spawned a lot of conspiracy theories. It created a lot of doubt. And even though security was an issue before the conduct of the election, you could see that the security agencies comported themselves professionally. And the greatest tribute one can pay in respect of that election was to the Nigerian voter. In certain jurisdictions in the conduct of that election, there were voters who stayed put at these polling units for 48 hours and insisted on waiting until the votes had been counted, sorted, and, the results announced. So we must pay special tribute to the voter. And arising from the conduct of those 2 elections, there were frustrations, particularly by civil society and by the media. There were people in civil society who were talking in terms of being deceived, in terms of being betrayed, because for them, what INEC told them was not what happened. What it promised was not what it delivered in respect of the upload of the results on the IRF. And going forward, therefore, INEC has to immediately address these issues. Address the issue of logistics, which affected the last link of logistics from the racks, the registration area centers, to the polling units. Address the issue of the beavers, the racks, the RATEX, that is the registration area technical support staff, must be seen to be up and doing when there are glitches. The results must be uploaded on the INEC results portal as pledged in the first place. Once these are done, I think that INEC will be on its path to redemption. That is my take.
All right, Dr. Mukhtar Imam, you were also with us as we x-rayed the last set of elections and analyzed them even as they were on real time. And now we're faced with another set of elections in a few days' time. What are the takeaways from the last exercise for you as to rub off on what is going to happen on Saturday?
Well, first and foremost, I think it will not be out of place to congratulate Nigerians on the doggedness and the resilience that has been displayed across the African continent, if not all over the world. We're basically witnessing democratic reversals where people are seeking alternatives. Across the African continent, we're seeing the incursion of the military and the return of the despotic military era in neighboring countries. And so therefore, I think it is only right that we hail ourselves and pat ourselves on the back that we have been able to say we refuse or reject the alternatives to democracy. And we hope to sustain this system. Having said that, elections are like every social issue. And just as every social issue, there are always hitches and glitches here and there. The issues are always multifaceted as they are multidimensional. Addressing the issues will also require the same approach. There isn't a silver bullet. There is no single way out of the situation. Having said that, with respect to the election in itself, there were basically three, to catalog them in my terms, three actors that basically helped shape the election and its outcome. One of them is the electoral umpire itself, INEC, the Nigerian citizenry, who basically are the voters, and of course the political actors. These are the three distinct players that have taken part and have shaped this election. The issues that have been raised with respect to the what we witnessed in the pre-election period are very apt. Speaking of the social issues, the economic issues that basically greeted us at the time, fuel scarcity, which basically has an impact in virtually everything we do. The cash crunch, which we basically witnessed as a result of the policies that came out of a central bank, either in its wisdom or lack of wisdom. But of course, we witnessed it. And of course, the issues of security as well. But beyond these issues, there are other issues that have basically tied all actors together. And one of them will be the trust deficit, which has been talked about and echoed and re-echoed in the course of the election. It is one that has tied all three actors, as I have mentioned here. And the trust deficit is as a result of, or a consequence of a certain act or a certain phenomenon, which is basically the death in communication. INEC basically has had the crisis or challenges of logistics from the inception, or rather the return to democracy since 1999. And we saw that play out again. We shouldn't be having a recurrent issue of crisis of logistics. Right. But of course, INEC has tried to, sort of defend its position by saying that these materials are sensitive and non-sensitive. And that, of course, as a result of the actions of certain individuals, it will not be safe to deploy these materials to where they should get to before the elections. But I think we should begin to look past that at this stage in our electoral, in our democratic development. We should be at a point where materials should get to the point where they are required, not lesser than 24 hours before the election. This is what we should begin to witness as a way of curbing the crisis of logistics that has been a recurrent decimal. And if INEC is able to do that, then we would have seen some part of the crisis, which basically ties these three players together, reduced. And so Nigerians, of course, will have a sigh of relief and be able to have more confidence in the electoral process. And then, of course, we also witness the challenges of the use of the beavers. This is a new technology as far as its use and deployment is concerned. Naturally, just as with every technological revolutionary innovation, there is the tendency of hitches and glitches here and there. And of course, INEC has witnessed that. It has tried to, I am sure, learn from the lessons which have been the outcome of the Presidential and National Assembly election, and we're hoping that in the next rounds of election that INEC will try to ensure that the use of this technology is sufficient, the use of this technology is as they have made Nigerians to believe. Because naturally, like I said earlier, you see, wherever there is a death in communication, the consequence of that is that there's heightened apprehension. And with apprehension, of course, you will have trust deficit. So basically, these are some of the takeaway from the Presidential and National Assembly elections. That is not to say that there weren't positives. We must give kudos to INEC for having conducted an election of this magnitude, and the use or deployment of technology for the first time, and to be able to see that the BVAS was to a certain extent, made some mark as far as the elections are concerned. The upload of the elections on the INEC portal is something that is of contest, but hopefully with time that is going to be resolved.
Okay, thanks so much. So many issues you've raised, and we'll look at some of them in greater detail as we go on. But let's turn to Paul James of Yaga Africa and ask the same thing, your impressions about what happened, the Presidential and National Assembly polls, and how these can be used as a yardstick to at least, project what should happen on Saturday this week.
Thank you very much, Cyril. So I will start first by perhaps looking at the different players in the election, but I'll start with election administration, of course, because that is where everything lies. I thought for me, INEC overestimated its capacity, it overpromised and underdelivered. This, I see, this is a process that did not start just in the week of the election. It started just after the 2019 elections. And at every point, INEC would tell Nigerians that they are ready. The election was premised on technology, and this is also through the sheer, if you like, doggedness, collaboration of every stakeholders in Nigeria to bring this to life, because we have seen what technology has done in other climes. So even in our election, how it has helped to show up citizens' confidence, how it has helped to improve the quality of some of the elections that were conducted in the past. We got the new Electoral Act. Everything about the election for now got its backing from the Electoral Act. There were a lot of promises that INEC had made that we thought we would see them come to life, like I said, in this election. Number one is, this election was supposed to be concluded on the basis of the number of PVCs that were collected. If we begin to talk about the margin of lead principles and all of that. So if we go back from the process even leading to the election, the process of voter registration, the process of PVC collection, they came with their own challenges. INEC was able to either maneuver or navigate through those challenges, which I thought, by my estimation, that to a large extent, they were not even enough. We went into the election until the week of the election before the Commission would provide data of the PVCs collected per state, not by polling unit. Now, if you recall, in 2019, perhaps a month before the election in 2019, we were getting weekly updates on the number of PVCs collected, to the level that we started also getting daily updates of the number of PVCs collected. Now, this election, like I said, was supposed to be determined by that. And then the expectation that every polling unit will have the number of PVCs collected. I am not sure that this was published anywhere, like there's a public data anywhere that say this is the number of PVCs per polling unit. Because when the Commission chair was making pronouncements at the end, I was asking the returning officers how many registered voters in the affected polling unit that were cancelled, how many PVCs were collected. I keep wondering, where did we get that data from? That is on one hand. On the other part is also how the commission managed logistics. I must commend them for one thing that they tried to do this time, which is to print some of these sensitive materials in country. That is very commendable. The ballot papers were printed in the country, and even the dispatch of the ballot papers, that was attempt to take them closer to the voters before the election. Because we had observers in all of the 774 local governments and in all of the state capitals. And we tried to check just before the election to see if the commission has commenced dispatch of sensitive materials. And we know, for instance, Wednesday before the election, Thursday before the election, some of these materials were already in the state. But then, of course, we saw what happened. The eve of the election, even in the FCT here, we asked questions, hard questions. The commission still promised Nigeria that they were ready, just like they did in 2019. And so we saw how also the election went on the day of the election. So, like Nick has said, like Dr. Iya has also said, the challenge for me, I think, was that of communication.
Okay.
If the commission had been open enough to be telling Nigeria its challenges, perhaps we'll all learn to manage expectations. And what I also thought had happened is also the rush by the commission to tick the box that they were able to conduct election on the day that they had set to conduct election. I mean, that means whatever consequences or whatever challenge that may happen. And we saw what played out at the end. Because if you go back also to some of the things we saw, even on the beavers, for instance, I know that the last sets of beavers were dispatched to the states on the 3rd of January. And then between the 4th of January to the 11th of January, the states did field testing of the beavers. The commission said it was an internal routine process and was not open to the public. This is the first time that you are deploying technology of that magnitude in a national election, and you think the public should not know what the commission was doing. We were privy to some of the things that happened during the testing, and we knew there was challenges as of then with connections to the internet. Some of the machines that were supplied were faulty. The power buttons were not working, the cameras were not working. Some states even complain about shortage of this machine. If we go back to also the mock exercise that happened on February the 4th, whilst to some extent it was successful because the equipment did work. If you recall, that mock exercise was conducted on the 4th of February, barely 20 days to the election. Whatever will have been the problem that stakeholders will have seen from that exercise, I thought the commission wouldn't have had enough time to have resolved the problems. What were the problems? For one, for instance, the timing of the exercise, I thought it was done too close. The personnel that the commission deployed for the exercise, the commission deployed its own staff and not necessarily the ad hoc staff that were supposed to get hands-on experience on how to apply the equipment. If you also think about, that was also when Nigeria began to discover that the commission had migrated voters to polling unit. Now, how did the commission manage that? All it simply did was to send a link for people to check online where they were going to vote. How many people have access to internet? That in a sense, as thought, was the beginning of the failure. We saw the attempt by voters to go out to participate in the process on election day. If you think about the heavy investment that was done in this election, the first budget we had about for the election as submitted to the National Assembly was 305 billion. And of course, we know with all that had happened, the natural disaster that affected INEC's offices, the attacks that INEC suffered, INEC installations and equipment in some parts of the country, we know that may have been some add-on to the commission. Think about also the investment that stakeholders have done in terms of voter mobilization, in terms of voter education. What did we get at the end? Only 27 or 26% of Nigerians, according to the commission, participated in the process. For not fault of theirs, it's not like people did not make attempt to participate in this process. We saw the huge voter turnout, but what happened? On one hand is the late commencement of polls by the commission. On the other hand, it's even whilst the commission was there, the lackluster attitude we saw, the lackadaisical attitude we saw on part of some of its own staff to even apply some of the rules. Commencement was late. The way they applied the beaver sometimes also, those for me were some of the things that even disenfranchised or discouraged some persons from participating. So I thought for me, most of this lies on the commission, but I'll come back to talk about other stakeholders as well.
Right. One thing that all have spoken about would be communication, and that is noted as one of the challenges which may affect Saturday's elections if that is not quickly rectified, the issue of communication, proactive communication. But we have another guest joining us on this discussion. Let me introduce Honorable Aliyu Gebi, Senior Security Advisor to the Minister of Interior and National Coordinator of Security Governance Initiation, SGI. He joins us via Zoom. Thanks for being with us tonight on this discussion. Thank you. We'll try to tweak the controls and ensure that we can hear you clearly from Paris. Okay. Fine. Now, if you can hear me, you must have followed the trend when we had the presidential and National Assembly elections. What are your impressions as we prepare for another round of elections on Saturday, the governorship and state assembly elections? Honorable Aliyu Gebi, could you unmute your audio? If you just unmute your audio so we can hear you.
Oops, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was muted.
Right, okay. Okay. Yes, go ahead now.
Okay. Thank you. I was saying, Mr. Stober, it is an honor to meet you. I've been a fan of yours for a very, very long time. So for me, this is a dream come true. And as far as the elections are concerned, first and foremost, I think Nigeria must be congratulated that against all odds, elections held, even when things seemed very, very dire and things seemed as if the elections were not going to hold. The president kept his promise and elections did hold, proving to the naysayers that when there's resolve and political will, even the seemingly impossible becomes possible. The elections held, and of course, yes, there were problems here and there. Voter apathy is something that is normal, considering the circumstances under which the elections were held, and considering the circumstances with which the electorate had to contend with, and also coupled with the fact that this is one of the first times, if not the first time, where we have an electoral process, an electioneering process, where the outgoing incumbent did not meddle with the process in any way, shape, or form. So again, President Muhammadu Buhari has to be congratulated. But having said that, it shows clearly that INEC, the umpire, needed to have prepared substantially more. This is a process that it was aware it was going to have to hold. It was going to have to be coordinated by INEC, and 4 years is long enough for INEC to test whatever technology, whatever processes, whatever deployment of whatever capabilities that it needed to have perfected up to this point should have been done. Having said that, we were able to cross that threshold. That will become, people did come out, people did vote, and a clear winner based on a constitutional mandate, constitutional margin has emerged. So the lessons of the past should be applicable in the lessons that we are about to experience in the next couple of days. And INEC should not give any excuses in terms of technology deployment, personnel deployment, resources deployment, because whatever INEC required, whatever asked for, the President Commander-in-Chief went out of his way to ensure that INEC was satisfied in terms of what their requirements were.
All right, thank you very much. We'll return to you. And, well, all eyes on Saturday this week. Yes. And some of these issues you've raised here. And people will be looking out to see that they are corrected. But there's another angle I'd like us to consider. It was thought that the presidential and National Assembly elections would attract a huge, huge voting public. But it would seem from the numbers we have, that didn't happen. Some 93.4 million almost over 90 million collected. Registered, and over 80 million collected their PVCs. But when it came to voting, it was just 24 point something million, or even if you round up that figure, 25 million. It's a far cry from those who collected the PVC. So something must have happened as to prevent those who collected the PVC. I've had people proffer all kinds of reasons. Some that, amongst those who collected their PVC, some would have passed on and some would have, and I said, well, there are other figures we can look at. But where I'm going is the fact that voter apathy, which someone has just talked about, is a factor. And should we expect that at the state level, the voters will turn up en masse, or would see a reflection of the kind of voting we saw during the presidential election?
Yes. Let me say that voter apathy is a matter of concern to some of us. And unfortunately, no major study has been done to interrogate why people are keeping away from the polls. But it is not difficult to hazard a guess. And one of these guesses, enlightened guesses, since I'm not profiling any answers based on empirical evidence. What I'm saying is a priori. So my own take is that since 1999, when this process started, there has been a remarkable decline in terms of voter turnout. And for me, there seems to be a correlation between the delivery of good governance and turnout. I think that systematically over the years, there has been also a marked decline in the delivery of good governance to Nigerians. The political class has not deemed it or seen it as being in its interest to deliver good governance. Unfortunately, because it does not even have a sense of its self-enlightened interest, it has shot itself literally in the foot, to the extent that people keep away from the polls. People are not encouraged to vote because they feel there's nothing in it for them. And I recall that when this process started, the then Minister of Information, under President Olusegun Obasanjo, initiated something. There was a media tour of projects, that were carried out by governors. And in the aftermath of that media tour, awards were given based on performance. And then a book was commissioned by the government, relating the sustenance of democracy and good governance. Now, the idea was to tie the idea of delivery of good governance with democracy, so that people will not have a stake in the process and people will not feel carried along. But by and by, we have seen a systematic decline in the delivery of good governance. And that, for me, is the major reason for which people, keep away from the polls, because they feel that even if I vote, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Now, if you put it also side by side with the fact that, what I'm saying is sustained by the fact that side by side, if you look at the conduct of elections, the conduct of elections seem to have improved. Because one of the complaints then was that people were afraid or had reservations that their votes were not going to count. But lo and behold, we have seen a remarkable improvement in the process. And one would have thought that with this improvement in the process and the kind of robust and muscular support that the election management body continues to get from stakeholders, you would have thought that people would come back to vote. But it has not happened. And this is simply because the people are disillusioned. They are unhappy. And also, for this particular election, one of the reasons must be the climate before the conduct of the elections. There are too many challenges.
Okay.
I've said this before,
All right.
that extreme poverty framed the conduct of these elections.
So people
were thinking on how to survive.
Rather than
People had
to go
no
cast a
money
ballot.
with which to buy foodstuff.
Okay, so there's another aspect. This I would want Dr. Mukhtar Imam to comment on now. Even amongst the 24.9 votes that were eventually cast, there is a question about those who were credited. Now, 80 million collected the cards, but when it came to the elections proper, there are those who have drawn attention to these figures, that about 25.2 million or thereabouts were accredited. But for some strange reason, only about 24.9 million actually voted. So questions have been asked. Did people go up to the polling stations, get accredited, and then left and decided not to vote? Were they in some way or the other disenfranchised? Did they, for some reason or the other, actually cast their ballots and something happened that removed those figures, amounting to about 300,000? Now, if questions are raised about that, what should we be looking at for the state elections, where the people will turn out? Would we see this kind of a thing too, where people will turn out, stay patiently in the queues, be accredited, because now you get accredited and you vote is simultaneous, unlike the old system where you could be accredited and you go away and come back. These things follow. So is it possible you would be accredited and then instead of going straight to vote, you deviate? Would we see this kind of a thing on Saturday?
We might. Basically, we're within the realm of speculation here. But of course, our speculations are built on, they are speculations, but they are built on concrete hypotheses, so to speak. You see, there are, like I said in the beginning, these social issues are multifaceted, they are multidimensional. And of course, we have re-echoed that position by painting these scenarios that could have led to individual citizens not casting their ballot on the day of election. A number of these reasons you have raised are basically factors that I believe strongly played out in the course of the election. In 2015, we conducted a survey and discovered that the political behavior, we were trying to measure the political behavior, side-by-side political communication, and so on and so forth, all of these indices that basically help to shape election, to bring a revolution into an electoral circle. And we got to discover that the 2015 election basically was as a result of a number of factors. The democratic reversal, which I talked about earlier, is basically tied to political apathy. Wherever people feel, wherever there is democratic reversal, it is as a result of certain dividends not being delivered to people. And so you find that people begin to become apolitical, which is the natural consequence of it. But beyond that, we got to realize that in 2015, like I was trying to say, that the turnout which we saw in 2015 was as a result of people feeling a sense of wanting to take part in bringing a change, a revolutionary change to the Nigerian elite structure. And so people turned out en masse. Now you will recall that in 2015, a significant number of the proportion of the people who came out to vote, or the voters at that time, were basically women.
Yes.
And so there was a shift, a paradigm shift in the political behavior of citizenry. Of course, that was also accompanied by the pattern of political communication, which basically was door-to-door campaign, which was one of the cardinal strategic position of the then government, to go door-to-door and talk to people, particularly in northern Nigeria. So a lot of women basically turned out to vote at that time. What am I getting at? That, you see, political behavior cannot be devoiced from what we have witnessed in this election. And this behavior we speak about can be clustered into two things: the socio-psychological conditioning of the Nigerian and the socio-economic conditioning of the Nigerian. These are the two factors that have basically played out in shaping what we have seen in this election. But another dimension that cuts between is the fact that we also should note that there are newly registered voters, because of course Nigeria is a population of over 65% young people, and so we have a new clusters of registered voters coming up who are also trying to get registered as well, who did get registered, but a chunk of that population have been affected by the democratic reversal we're talking about here, have been affected by the political apathy we speak about here, as a result of the political psychosis of the average Nigerian. We see this thing as not an obligation. A chunk of Nigerians see it that way. And so when people go out there to get their PVC, they want a means of identification. That is what we have witnessed. We have carried out preliminary studies, and this is what we're beginning to see. That this attitude, the attitudinal issues are playing out as well. And so it will not be absolutely wrong to say people went, got registered and refused to vote. Perhaps because of the way we have monetized our politics, and so people expected that money was going to play a factor.
And this time around there was hardly any.
A factor here. And so obviously that turned a lot of people off, and young people in particular. So a chunk of that population left. Again, there's the other scenario you painted, which is also a plausible scenario. Remember what happened in Kogi State, for example, with Yahya Bello and Natasha, when he dug, the report that he dug trenches and said he was doing it for security purpose. That in itself would disenfranchise a lot of people, because people couldn't go out to vote. There was the fear. And so the fear factor is basically also adding to the situation as well. And then, of course, there is the insecurity, the issues of insecurity. There is the issue of the cash crunch, basically, as a result of a policy of the CBN, which also affected the conduct of the election with respect to what we're speaking of here. So these are all plausible and possible scenarios that basically have played out in as far as this election is concerned. But going forward, I think a lot needs to be done with respect to delivery of governance, as has been mentioned here, because, of course, naturally, where there is the problem, recall I talked about the socio-economic and the socio-psychological conditioning. In the socio-psychological conditioning cluster, there is the problem of patriotism, which is lacking in a lot of Nigerians, unfortunately. And then again, there is the problem of discipline.
Right.
And on the second side, because you see, discipline is about attitude, it's about your willingness to carry out, it's about seeing the collective first. And then again, there is a socio-economic condition. We mustn't forget about that. There is a huge income inequality crisis.
You know, I am tempted to ask you this. Is Nigeria short of patriots?
Yes, significantly. Significantly, from top to bottom. You see, the issue of patriotism is something that manifests. It manifests in conduct, in how people carry themselves. And we are not seeing that manifest in our judiciary. We're not seeing that manifest in our civil service. We're not seeing that manifest within the public service, where we talk about our political class. We're not seeing that manifest in the followership as well. A huge chunk. And that's why when Lagarde was in the country and spoke to the president and talked about discipline, of course, she talked about a lot of policies which I disagree with respect to devaluation and so on and so forth. But she told the president, she said, Mr. President, a chunk of your population are in disciplined lot. We failed to look at the message, but we kept on hitting and hammering on the messenger. But this is the truth. I mean, take, for example, simple things as obeying traffic. In the city center here, where we all stay, you will see that the attitude, the lukewarm attitude of average Nigerians towards something as that, crossing a pedestrian, for example. These are things that are manifest of patriotism. Patriotism is an act which stimulates, right? And so when these things are no longer there, there is a problem. It is as a result of that we're seeing the trust deficit, where INEC will say, I cannot deploy sensitive materials, where INEC will say 162 attempts were made at our server. Why should that be the case? It is as a result of indiscipline and lack of patriotism that somebody will destroy the ballot box when he knows that it is of no benefit, of no use to him. And so these attitudinal issues require a lot of redress. There is a need for reorientation. But side by side that, again, like I said, there's the need to also address the socio-economic deficits.
Security is a matter that's been raised, and I'd like to go back to Honorable Aliou Gaby in Paris. You are a senior security advisor and you are a coordinator of the Security Governance Initiation. Now, there was a time when many Nigerians felt that elections would not hold in the southeast, given the security situation there. Surprisingly, the elections held, and the numbers were even surprising because it had been thought that far less than that would turn up because of the security situation. Now the state elections are coming as well. The security situation, is it still a serious factor? Because now you will talk of the deployment of security agents to the states where the elections are held, 28 of them. Would this still be a factor? Because I've heard people say, kudos to the security agencies, they stood their ground, and the incidents were few and far between. Tell us from your expert point of view. Again, perhaps you might unmute your audio.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I forgot. Yes. Right. When the doctor, the last speaker, spoke about patriotism, I think this is the best position to situate what patriotism means. What patriotism means within this context is exactly what our security and defense forces did against all odds. They went out there, they secured the terrain, they ensured that the impossible became possible, and people came out and people voted. Now, that is patriotism. Side by side with patriotism, of course, is lack of, or a sense of national identity, a sense of belonging. Again, to juxtapose what the doctor was talking about and a sense of national identity, it's not so much about patriotism as it is a sense of belonging and a sense of identity and a sense of recognition, a sense of ownership of processes and a sense of ownership of what this nation is and who it belongs to. So ours is a lack of that national identity because you don't feel a sense of belonging. You cannot be patriotic to what you don't feel a sense of ownership to. So perhaps that is where we got it a little bit wrong in that perspective. Elections held because of patriotic components within our society, because of components that believe in our national identity and components that are Nigerian in their identity. So they are able to discharge perhaps the only components within our system, whatever their duties are as Nigerians who have a stake in this contraption called Nigeria. Elections will hold, and I'm pleased to say, as someone who was in the political space, it is gladdening to see how our political processes and our political terrain is evolving. If you look at National Assembly, for example, for the first time since the deviation after the 7th Assembly, we have a National Assembly that is almost evenly balanced. We have a National Assembly that will have to define its own identity by its own self, not to be induced from an external perspective. So this is beautiful. This is an exceptionally good development. We have political parties that have only one seat. And the beauty of this representative democracy that we're practicing is they must be represented at the National Assembly level, and they must participate, and they must have a voice. That is a beautiful thing that just happened. And we are also on the cusp of perhaps producing the first female governor in the history of this country. That is a beautiful thing. A Fulani woman, a Muslim woman from troubled northeastern part of Nigeria is on the cusp of becoming the first female governor in the history of our country. It shows things might be going wrong in a different perspective, but things are certainly going right in other perspectives. This will be the most keenly watched, keenly followed, keenly contested gubernatorial election, perhaps in my own lifetime. We have seen the terrain, we have seen the space. The electorate have realized the powers that they have. Even those who thought they didn't have a voice now realize that they have a voice. The center is done. Now we have to go back to the subnationals where really our problems are, where if you elect someone who does not represent you well at the state level or a weak state legislature, it is up to you to suffer for the next 4 years. So back to your specific question. The security terrain is stable. The security matrix is exceptionally competent, capable, and stable, and deployments that were done covertly and overtly are still maintained. A sense of calm and a sense of rationality will prevail, and whoever attempts to scuttle this beautiful process that we have embarked upon, this change that we're about to witness, this rebirth of a national identity that has been weakened because of, again, like the doctor said, maybe perhaps unpatriotic acts. Whoever tries to scuttle this will be trying to attempt to stop a tidal movement, a tidal wave by the Nigerian people towards a new Nigeria, a new definition of a consensus-based identity. Talking about the youth, for example, the youth don't feel a sense of belonging, don't have a sense of identity. Therefore, they do not understand contextually what our own history is. At the same time, if there was a Wizkid or a Davido concert, 50,000 people will fill a stadium capacity and attend and enjoy themselves. Why? Because they feel a sense of belonging. They feel a sense of identity with that entertainer who has asked them to come. They would even pay to attend. My generation did that for President Muhammadu Buhari. We grew up on President Muhammadu Buhari's stories. Our parents told us about it. We keyed into it. We understood it to the point where we grew up. We aligned behind him in CPC, for example, where I was elected a member of House of Reps. And we moved heavens and earth to ensure that we represented what Buharism meant. And some of us were lucky enough to get, within a short period of electoral life, to be elected into parliament. That is the beauty of the evolution of our democratic processes. However, right now there is no organic connection. You have, again, like the doctor mentioned, a teeming population of youth that do not feel that organic connection. And at this point, what Peter Obi has done, to me, somebody who did CPC, who was rallying around a central center of gravity, President Muhammadu Buhari, is something that should not be discounted so easily. He has shown that with the right messaging, you can galvanize a movement. So politicians need to look inwards and understand what is it that connects them organically with the population that they seek to represent, other than just the normal political rhetoric. Times have changed. The Nigerian youth is one of the most politically savvy, the most aware, the most astute youth anywhere in the world. Times have changed. That political inclusivity that we're talking about is not just horizontal. It has to be vertically. And you can see also for the first time, again, in a very long time, we have a 20-something-year-old who has just become a member-elect in the House of Representatives. Times have changed. We must change with the time. Otherwise, we'll keep having these bottlenecks that we, those who are beginning to fade out, keep creating, inadvertently scuttling the future of people whose future perhaps most of us will not see. Then lastly, we must also understand the 2 years that we lost to COVID also played a significant role in reshaping the psyche of the human animal within the space of the 21st century. This is something that we are not really addressing. The human animal, most human beings, are not used, cannot be left alone to their own devices. The entire world was under lockdown. So if you look at that perspective and where we are, and the youth that just went back to school after 8-month strike and then came out, you can see that disconnect that we're talking about, some are organic, but some are inorganic. But we are at the cusp of greatness. I believe that with all my heart. All right. This would be the legacy of this administration, the fact that the entire terrain was changed. And we will see more miracles, in my opinion, and I pray so, come Saturday, where traditional expectations will shift to totally unpredictable, uncalculated, unforeseeable traditional structures. But the security apparatus will maintain law, will maintain order, will maintain sanctity, and elections will hold peacefully, inshallah.
All right then, thanks. We will look forward to that. But at this point in time, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll continue with this conversation. We'll look at it from other angles. We'll examine the question of women's participation. If it's something to celebrate, you have one woman out of 28 on the ballot paper. Well, some will say we have moved ahead. We'll look at that. We'll also return to the matter of insecurity, the security challenges, and certainly we will look at the matter of a national identity, as one of our guests said, whether it's a national identity and the disconnect between the various aspects. But we'll take a short break now. Stay with us on NTA Tuesday Live. We'll be back shortly. Thanks for staying with us. Now, this is the part where you get to join in the discussion in the studio. The numbers will be on your screens any moment from now. We encourage you to take advantage of those numbers and call in. And we say this every Tuesday. If you're calling in tonight and your call gets through to the studio, do us a favor, turn down the volume of your TV set. That's the way to avoid the hurlback or the echo. And go straight to the point. Keep it short and simple. There are others waiting to get on the platform to And we always say this as well. We encourage you to go straight, not to bother about the greetings. Just a mere hello would do. Nothing more than that. So, we start off this segment. Let's go over to Paul James now. We've listened to some of the points that were made here, particularly the question of patriotism. Someone else decided to call it, Aliu Gaby calls it a national identity crisis. We've asked about the security situation. He seems optimistic that security agencies will secure the atmosphere. But let's look at the people, the voters themselves. The apathy we talked about, or the other factors that can lead to disenfranchisement. Are we going to see that on Saturday?
I think that for me there is more to this than what we're seeing, than the scratch from on the surface that we are currently seeing. The fundamental question to ask is even the credibility of the voter register that we have been using. If you recall, the last time we did a fresh voter registration was 2011. It took Professor Jega and the team about 3 weeks to do that exercise. And since then, there has not been an attempt to audit the register of voters. All we keep doing for every election cycle is add on. In 2019, before the election, INEC did inform Nigerians that it had registered 84 million voters. We went into that election, and at the end of the election, the figures we saw were less than 84 million, a discrepancy of about 1.6 million. Now, this same election, INEC told Nigerians it had registered 93 million and 87 million had collected their PVCs. But only a quarter of that number had participated in the election. Now, consistently what we have been seeing this decline to the effect that we are seeing an average of 35%, 30 to 35% in terms of participation. In this election, if you do the turnout by the number of PVCs collected based on the number that INEC presented, you will get the 26%. But if you do by the number of registered voters, you will get the normal average. It's about 33, 34% by the number of registered voters. But that is also still disturbing, still worrisome, especially if you look at certain elements around this election that I had mentioned earlier. One is the concern that we thought, some attempt that we think could have constituted voter suppression. I give you a simple example. If you think about the PVC collection and how it was done and the sort of complaints that came from the PVC collection, some locations you go, the cards are not sorted in a manner that could be easier to hand them out to voters. And then the place, some of these locations were rowdy, not properly managed. Some people will get fed up and will leave the locations. Others will come at some point. You will receive reports that officials are not even showing up to come and distribute these PVCs to the voters. Now, we went into the election. Beyond the late commencement, if you also dig deep into this late commencement, there was a trend that we have seen consistently in 4 elections, the trend of late commencement in certain parts of the country. In the southeast and the south-south geopolitical zone. In the southeast, for instance, by 9:30 in the morning, based on the data that we gathered, only 11% of centers had commenced accreditation and voting. In fact, in the southeast, we got report from Anambra as late as 4 p.m. there were locations where INEC officials were still expected. Now, even on election day, we deployed a representative random sample of 1,507 polling units that are spread in all the 774 LGs. From our sample, there are 20 locations where INEC did not conduct election. This is just a sample. Think about if you are extrapolating this. Before the election, there were security concerns. We tried to recruit observers late December. There were communities we could not penetrate because of insecurity. There were communities that, down to the polling unit, that were deserted. We had questions whether INEC was going to conduct elections in those communities. All INEC did at the end was to provide data of locations where they did not allocate any voter to, not locations that had security concerns, with the assurances that everything was going to be sorted. Now, to the security as well, there were these concerns. They did not start today. Stakeholders were doing their mappings and were raising these issues. All you keep seeing from our security that is becoming like a norm is to do what they call show of force, and mostly done very late in the process. A week or 2 weeks of the election, you see them with the heavy equipment and all of that, parading the state capital, not even the local governments or the communities. Whoever has made up their mind based on the insecurity they saw before the election to not participate in the process, they will not participate in the process. If you think about also the Naira crunch, now, I give you a practical example. I had a call from Enugu State the Monday before the election. The voter was registered in Abuja and could not transfer his registration because also of the challenges with registration that the person encountered while INEC was doing that. The person went to the park to return to Abuja. Transporters refused to collect transfers. This person had no cash to transport themselves to Abuja.
And there will be so many like that. I'll just ask you to pause a while. We have our first caller on the line, Uche, calling in from Lokoja. Hello, Uche, go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening. Hello, can you
Hello, Uche.
Good evening. I don't know if you can hear me.
Is Uche still on the line?
Yes, okay. Yeah, I just
All right. Doesn't look like that's coming through. Well, we'll have better calls coming in. Yes, just go on. Right.
There are a lot of issues for me that I thought hindered voters from participating in the process. But going back even to the security, before the election, we highlighted in our pre-election observation report, I think the one we released late December, about 9 states that we thought the security agency needed to pay attention to. Niger was one of the states, specifically Shiroro local government in Niger State. And we saw what happened on the eve of the election. Some communities were ransacked. People left the communities on the eve of the election. Consistently, we have been seeing reports from the southeast also about attacks on INEC facilities and also attacks in some communities. Ihiala in Anambra State, for instance, we could not recruit any observer from the community because of insecurity. There is also Ihagu or something from Ebonyi State that we could not also recruit observers because of insecurity. And each time we get this report, we share with the security agencies. You don't get to hear any reaction from this security until the week of the election, like I said, before you begin to see all the whatever they want to do for the public to see, and not necessarily because it was intended to curb that insecurity.
All right. Uche, who called in earlier, for some reason, Uche is still on the line, but we've decided to try again and see if we can get him on. Uche, are you still on the line? Go ahead with a question or comment. Uche calling in from Lokoja.
Yes, I'm calling you from Lokoja. Yeah, should I go ahead?
There's nothing we can pick out from that. No, we'll just move ahead and hope that Uche, you might call back later, but we still can't get you. All right. Okay, so these are so many of the issues. There's still another aspect, Nick, we've not talked about. But taking off from where we just left off regarding security, this might affect some of the areas where voting will be taking place in this 28 states. So,
well, what we expect from the security agencies, particularly the police, which is the lead agency, is to take another look at their own security mapping. I recall in one of the discussions we had here with AIG, the AIG in charge of operations, he acknowledged that they receive information from the civil society, and some of the areas that, risk areas that they have mapped have been useful to them. But the extent to which they deploy in these places is another thing, but he certainly acknowledged it. And I expect, therefore, that, in deploying for the governorship and state house of assembly elections, the security agencies will take due cognizance of these spots where, you have frequent or perennial insecurity, particularly those areas in Niger State, in the southeast and so on, and that their deployment will reflect the level of security, insecurity in those areas. In terms of this show of force, the people that love to, I'm not holding brief for the security agencies, but people would love to have this show of force replicate itself, not just in the local government or state headquarters, but also in the rural areas. But I think these things are normally done at the eve of the conduct of elections. And from experience, civil society and the media have always expressed fears that this show of force tend to put the voters into fear, and as a result of which they don't turn up. But when I was in the commission, our experience was the opposite. After the election we had in Ekiti State, and there was violence, and then we had another election, I think 2013 or so, and one of the things the security agencies did was to do massive deployment of their men. And people expressed a lot of fears as to whether that was going to frighten the people and they were not going to come out. But INEC registered one of the highest voter turnout of any of its off-cycle governorship elections, in that election in Ekiti State. So what we saw is that the massive deployment and the show of force gave people confidence to come out and vote. And from that experience, I expect that the security agencies would use that template, and they will also work with the election management body, which also deploys its own risk management tool, the civil society. I know Yaga Situation Room, TMG, also have their own risk tools, and that they will share this information, this intelligence with the security agencies, and that the security agencies will bring this on board, and that their deployment, will not only reflect that, but that there will be some changes, because in time past, the deployment tended to reflect the three concentric ring, where you now had the polling unit level, where two policemen are posted per polling unit, they are not armed. Then there's another set of another ring, another set of security agencies at the level of the ward, who can now intervene in the event of any incident. And then those at the border of the states, who also monitor events as they unfold on election day. But we expect to see more motorized a group of security people, going around, not just being stationary as in the past, so that as soon as there are any reports, they can not only intervene, but it will be very difficult for someone to now penetrate through that concentric ring. So we need to, my sense is that we should see a modification of the previous template, because the miscreants, the insurgents also, would have risen up to this particular template, and therefore they'll develop their own template.
Well, Dr. Imam, could I ask you this? How much of the outcome of the Presidential and National Assembly election do you think would rub off on Saturday this week?
Well, I am hopeful that we're going to see a lot of positives from the next election, and reason is very simple. This election is one of the most anticipated since the return to democracy since 1999. It is one of the most concerning to both domestic and international observers and players. And the reason is because this is the first time that we're seeing the rise of certain elements within the political space. This is the first time we're seeing a saturation of the entire political space. For example, the Peter Obi factor, for example, the Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso factor, which basically was to make a statement to say that you can actually build a political party within the space of 3 to 6 months organically, and of course make that level of impact at the national level. So anticipation was built up over time in the lead up to the election. From what we have seen thus far, from all of the shortfalls and shortcomings that have been identified with respect to how the umpire INEC conducted the election, structurally and otherwise, I am very sure and hopeful that on Saturday's election, we will see some level of improvement. INEC has made a statement, and I am very sure that INEC is not going to go back on it, not this time, not with the level of heat and apprehension that has arisen from what we have seen from the Presidential and National Assembly election, that the technology in question here is going to be revisited, and they will ensure that that is done. I believe with all conviction that if INEC is going to go back on its words with respect to that, then words will have no meaning any further. But that is just one element within the electoral system. There are also issues of security like has been raised.
Right.
I believe that security has improved significantly. When we look at our election from where we're coming since 1999 through to where we are right now, the issues of violence within our electoral system, or the electoral cycle itself, from pre, during, and post, we have seen a significant decline as far as that is concerned. The violence and fear that has arisen with respect to the current election has its peculiarities. Insurgency and militancy and so on and so forth, which we speak about, which would have been the first point of fear to Nigerians, did not play any significant role. Because if it had, we would have seen that in Maiduguri. We would have seen that in flashpoints like Zamfara, and so on and so forth. So I would want to, again, give kudos to the security operatives for what they have done, given the circumstances. And what circumstances do I speak of? Kano State has 44 local governments and has less than 40,000 policemen manning it. The personnel is not sufficient to start with. And so having the Louis Edet House deploy the entire police force it has to local governments and so on and so forth for a show of force, I don't think that is within the SOP of any security architecture. And so therefore, I think as far as security is concerned, and when you look at the peculiarity which I was speaking about, the case of the Southeast was basically unique. Unique in the sense that it was about a group seeking secession, threatening people, and naturally people were responding to that threat or the fear in manners that people ought to respond to. And so that played some role with respect to disenfranchising people in that region. It is not about the election, it's a long-standing issue, which I also would join in calling on the central government to find a way to address once and for all, so that we don't see the recurrence and resurgence of these issues and then they become a threat to our electoral circle whenever elections begin to come up.
Right. Well, we still have Aliou Gebi Verzoum from Paris. I'd like to bring this to you. It's always been thought that the governors, the state governors, wield huge influence. In fact, there are some who would tell you that a state governor is as powerful, if not more powerful, than the president himself because of what they can do and undo. Do you see that playing out? I know some people have said some governors lost out in the National Assembly elections, some sitting governors, and some could not, as they say, deliver their states to their parties. But do you see this extending to the governorship elections and the state assembly elections, especially when you have in mind that it's always been said that governors are almost 100% in control of the state assemblies?
I think you're correct. But again, one beautiful fact that has emerged from this electoral process is the incontrovertible fact that the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is no longer the exclusive reserve retirement right or retirement plan for former governors. This election has destroyed that myth. That's number one. Number two, another thing that we should realize is the most powerful group of Nigerians anywhere in the Nigerian space are the governors or former governors. So we have a situation where right now, the president-elect, former two-term governor, his VP, former two-term governor, Peter Obi from LP, former governor, Konkoso, former governor, etc., and etc., etc. So we're beginning to see governors now migrate from the National Assembly space to the presidency space, where it may eventually become, again, their exclusive preserve. Number two, our problem in Nigeria is at the subnational level. If the governors were popular, if the governors were pro-people, if the governors were loved by their people, for example, like a certain governor in the Northeast is allegedly loved by his people, then we would not have any problems in the center. But when you have governors that have not delivered, governors that have failed based on almost every indices by a few of them, who rode on the coattails of a very, very popular presidential candidate and expected, because of that popularity, to be automatically anointed to come back into government and to hold on to the people, all of a sudden to have that center of gravity removed. You see them floundering. Our governors are floundering. And if you look at it again critically, most of our governors, especially in the ruling party, APC, are governors who are serving out the conclusion of their terms. So all the balls are at this point are up in the air. Anyone that the people feel a sense of organic connection to, just as they did in CPC, this movement of new so-called third force did not just start now. It started way before even 2011. So as long as people identify with a certain center of gravity, they will dare the odds, they will brave the odds, they will challenge the odds, they will come out and ensure that the right thing based on their own understanding is done, because it is about, again, political inclusivity. It's not just playing lip service to that word, it's people believing in the product. It's not about the packaging. It's the belief in the product. Again, we had a candidate here in President Muhammadu Buhari, who again did not spend money in campaigning. People believed in him to the extent that villagers will sell their only chickens and goats to put money together to go out to campaign for President Muhammadu Buhari, then candidate Muhammadu Buhari. So it's about conviction and belief. And the beauty of this democracy that is maturing right in front of our eyes, despite the fact of the chaos that it seems to be coming with, change usually comes with chaos. Before stability, there must be some level of chaos. This is incontrovertible. We are going to see how are shifting from the traditional institutions to some totally new spaces where people feel some sense of, again, organic attachments too. People are tired of the consistency of the failures of people that they seemingly come out every 4 years to elect. And it is only, sir, during the election period that people in Nigeria are treated as citizens and not as subjects. This is the only time that the poor people, the electorate, the masses, have a say in ratifying a process that was created to select people who would lead them. That's the only time the Nigerian subject becomes a citizen. After the election, they go back to being subjects. For the first time, we are seeing people forcefully migrating from subjecthood to citizenhood. So I am eagerly anticipating Saturday, because we will see new terrain. We will see ceilings, not glass ceilings, concrete ceilings being shattered, and we will begin to see the will of the people being enforced at the ballot. There will be elections, it will hold, it will be secure, but the will of the people must be allowed to prevail. And lastly, INEC. We know INEC operates in very difficult terrain, etc., but INEC has conducted elections consistently in the Northeast. It's even at the peak of the war in the Northeast. So INEC should set up. These conversations we're having are conversations that should have been had before the fact, not after the fact. INEC really has very little excuse, in my opinion. It is 4 years. You know you are going to hold this. You know you are going to do this. So you should improve on whatever it is. Talking about SOPs of security, let us be fair to the police. When you look at the damage the police suffered because of the NSAS riots, it is natural for the police to be a little bit more introspective, a little bit more hesitant in how they engage with the people. And in terms of show of force, 75% of security deployment is covered. You don't see it, you don't feel it, and just because you don't see it or you don't feel it does not mean it is not there. The show of force is just a culmination of chain of activities to serve as a deterrent. But in terms of mechanism, to deter, to disrupt, to agitate, to confuse, to conflate, to deflate, to totally obliterate any miscreant, any proposal, supposition, or thereabouts in terms of usurping the authorities of constituted authority is something that has been done. It has been done, and it will consistently be done. And we should be thankful to our security forces that are not partisan, that have remained Nigerian, have remained nationalistic, and have remained patriotic. And may God reward them for doing such a fantastic job.
But again, Aliu Gebi, I must come to you with this. Yes, the show of force is meant to deter and do all those things you said, but there are those who would question that the show of force takes place in the urban centers, it's been mentioned here, and some would ask, in the case of Shiroro, after all the show of force, where was that show of force in Shiroro? In Niger State?
You see, it's a good question, because when you're going to have a show of force, for example, there are variables that are considered that cannot be debated in the public space. Whatever information that is being contended with in the security space is not something that can be now discussed outwardly, so that it makes sense, because what you see as a bystander, as a citizen, should be translated to the fact that of what is on the ground and what you understand. So show of force, whether in the urban areas or in the hinterlands or in spaces where the eyes of the citizens are not there, is something that is sustained and is ongoing. As you and I are talking here, show of force is being carried out in almost every spaces horizontally in the country. But is it show of force that is visible? Is it show of force that is tangible? Perhaps not to the citizens, but to those who the forces, the show of force, are directed at. They know it is there and it is tangible, and it is only because of that that you see even Boko Haram or ISWAP or whatever they call their names that started bringing out propaganda material from their own archives about elections. Elections still held, just as elections held even during the peak of the war. So show of force is only one side of the equation.
Okay.
But the biggest side of the equation is something that is not tangible. It's something that is not in the political space and must remain so.
Okay. All right. Back here, another issue which I want us to look at, women's participation. We've always mentioned it when the elections come. At the level of the presidential contest, there was one woman, and in fact, that presidential candidate was less than visible anywhere throughout. Now we have the governorship elections, and there's a woman who's contesting. There are 28 states where the governorship elections will take place, and the 36 state assemblies. And I think for the level of development in Nigeria, one woman, is that good enough?
Well, okay.
All James.
I think so.
I know which one.
The thing is, the involvement of all creed, all sexes in the political space is something that should be welcomed. It's something that should be encouraged, right? But that is not to say that the conversation should tilt towards the sexes of individuals who occupy public offices. This is where the conversation is often misconstrued, and then all sorts of emotions and sentiments begin to wade in. It will be a thing of joy for me in particular to see the first female governor emerge in Adamawa State, who is Binani, who's basically the contestant of the APC, the flag bearer of the APC in Adamawa State. Not because she's a woman, not because of her sex first, but because this woman has consistently shown capacity as far as governance and delivering its dividend to people within her constituency is concerned.
So for you, it's not a matter of gender.
I'll go there. You see, when we continue to talk about the issue of gender, the issue of ethnicity, the issue of religion, these are basically the things that galvanizes our thoughts. And it has played out even in the just concluded election, significantly, right? So when we continue to focus on these primordialities, then we only leave room for mediocrity to rise. And then we shield meritocracy or merit to the sideline. This is what we subconsciously do by constantly reinforcing that position. But as far as women involvement in political spaces is concerned, it's something that we should encourage. It's something that we should welcome. And it is something that we're doing decently well. I have a quarrel with this on two fronts. First is the position of Western pundits and Western philosophers that there is a suppression of women in positions of authority across the African continent, and that this is a patriarchal society. This is a myth, and we need to begin to demystify it. It took America 100 years to allow the first woman to vote, from 1820 to 1920. How long did it take us? It took the United States 249 years to get the first female speaker. We did it in 12. So, I mean, when you look at these things in comparative terms, you will come to see that climes are making significant strides. Rwanda has the highest number of female representatives in parliament, 49%, at a time when the United Kingdom is battling with an all-time high of 23%. Africa, this continent, has produced 8 female presidents at a time when the United States is battling with the first one, and they deprived her. So when you look at this in that regard, you begin to find that there are certain issues that need to be addressed headlong. The reason why I speak about this in this sense is that whenever I am in a gathering of women, I tend to tell them, look, until you begin to understand that politics and occupation of public spaces is about, first, tact, and secondly, strategy. You must be strategic in thinking and tactful in acting. It is not about your sex. Let's look at, for example, the laws that are laid down in this country. From the Constitution to the party laws, they allow for women the same equal rights are given to citizens. So what we should be doing is to find the way, which is the second fold of what I'm about to talk about, to encourage more women to come into the political space. I would love to see that. But whenever the pundits talk about women need to wait for the climb to be created, who is going to create the climb? The same men who have basically saturated the political space. Power has never been given. And so there is the need for people who feel that there are women who have the capacity to deliver, women who have substance, women who can come into the political space and make a difference, just as the case of Bilani. I'm speaking about this woman not because I know her in any personal capacity, but because when you look at her antecedents, she has made significant strides as far as the growth of democracy is concerned. So it is a welcome development. I say this to all women, including my daughter who's just 3 years old. And when I speak to her, my wife looks at me and says, what is happening to you? I say, you can achieve whatever. You can attain whatever position you want to get to. And it is something that we need to begin to encourage our women to do. If you have the capacity, if you're coming into the political space for the right reasons, to deliver the dividends of governance to people. Because the truth of the matter is, because we have continued to hold on to these primordialities, to these primordial ideals and concepts, we have had people in position of authority who have no business with governance. And this is the reason why we're suffering from the misgovernance that we're greeted with today. And we must understand, as has been said by others, that this whole thing starts from the subnational. There is no meaningful development that can come to this country except with the involvement of the subnationals. The governors are very, if not more critical, as far as development is concerned. So where we have more women, let them bring themselves out. A certain illustration has been given about election being a beauty pageant, and that's exactly what it is. It is those who have paraded themselves that the most beautiful will be selected from. But perhaps the most beautiful is in someone else's house. So until you present yourself, how do we know you have the capacity? So this is the hard line, this is the hard truth that we need to begin to push into the psyche of our women.
Yeah, but
yes,
I agree with you with some modifications. First of all, I think the way we are structured in this country is unfair to women. If you look at the population of Nigeria, the population of men and women is almost at par. 61% to 49% for women. And if you look at almost all the spaces, they are truly marginalized. They have been driven to the margins. And we don't consciously make any effort to make sure that we bring them from that periphery to the center. And I've always believed that women have a lot to bring to the table. And I have one or two facts to support this.
All right.
If you look at when the world had COVID challenge, and you look at the number of leaders who rose to that challenge, the first 6 leaders that rose to the challenge of taming COVID were women. From Angela Merkel then, to Jacinta of New Zealand, who just resigned, to the Prime Minister of Sweden, Norway, all they were female. And women bring a lot of focus. Women are more focused on issues than men. And one of the things that has given rise to the exponential growth and development of China is investment in girl child education. We have not seen that kind of investment in Nigeria. We have not seen, in fact, any support that people give to women consciously. So we need really to go back, for me, to look at how we can, even if it is by affirmative action, it may not be the way to go. But you see, there are issues about which only women can make input into. I was watching a program on CNN, and I didn't understand that there was a relationship between teenage girls going to school and not going to school until someone now, a lady came out and was providing sanitary materials to them. And that increased the attendance in schools. Now, it never occurred to me as a man, but this is something that occurred easily to a woman. So, if we give opportunity for women, there are certain things that, by dint of their own nature, only they can bring to that. For example, if you are doing a law in the National Assembly that concerns women, and you don't involve them in the law, how does that law become robust?
Well,
so much as I'm not saying that you deliberately cut corners or you don't. Women should also compete like men, but we need to encourage them to recognize the need to even work in unison. Once upon a time, we had primaries of a national political party in Abuja, and all the women queued behind a male candidate. And the only female who contested voted for herself. So women also need to work together to recognize that, in fact, they are endangered in our own space, and to work in concert, and not to continue waiting for handout, or to believe that someone out there will continue to give them affirmative action. But we need to revisit our attitude towards women.
Right, Paul James, apart from having just one in the contest at the state levels, I don't have the statistics now of how many women are contesting into the state assemblies. But again, it's something to look forward to and hope that there will be more women who turn out to participate and vote on Saturday.
Sadly, we might not say that. While I agree that it should not be about tokenism or just handouts to women, we should also, I think we need to also x-ray the process that is also bringing us to this level now, especially the political party system and also the party primaries that had happened. Whether or not it was because of the reduction in the number of parties, we have seen a drastic reduction in the number of women that are participating in the process this time. Recall when we had about 90-something parties in 2019, we had more women, but now that there are just 18 parties, what we have seen from the statistics as released by INEC, that it's even, if you like, the parties you could call smaller parties or fringe parties that are even given more opportunities to women than the frontline parties. And we also saw what happened with the party primaries, the nomination fees and all, the exorbitant costs of the nomination form. While I will agree that they should also strive to do some of the things that the men do, I mean, I thought those are the bottlenecks along the clocks along the wheel.
The midnight meetings,
the nocturnal meetings.
Nocturnal meetings.
I was coming to that. I was landing on that one.
Nocturnal meetings, I think, are just an aspect of political conversation. Okay. I don't think Aisha Binani has been part of nocturnal meetings and has achieved what she has achieved. And with respect to what you have just said, James, you see, the APC gave free nomination forms to women. Didn't it?
Would that be seen as tokenism?
Well, the point is this, that yes, it did.
Yeah, going back to the first thing you said, actually, that's what I was also trying to run away. Anyway, go ahead. Go ahead.
But we see when these nomination forms were handed, women were told to take nomination forms for free in the APC.
No, I think they were giving 50%. They were giving a rebate, a discount of 50%, if my memory serves me well.
Fine.
It was fine. Not, and then there were other administrative charges. Yes. There were other administrative charges that comes to that with that.
My point is, you see, the thing here, the issue here is these structural issues that we talk about can only be changed by women themselves. Yes. And until they come into the space, this is what I'm encouraging. I'm not saying there should be a competition between men and women. Of course, politics is about competition, even between men and men. Do you know the population of men that are disadvantaged? What is the population of men holding power, Uncle Cyril? Are they up to 5%? So when you begin to talk about the pyramid, the hierarchy of it, and people who are disadvantaged, yes, of course, there are those who are at the top of the ladder, and there are those who are at the bottom. And those who are at the bottom of the ladder are a combination of men and women. So we are all a collective within a system that appears to be suppressive, within a system that puts us in a position of servitude. This is what the system intends to do to us. Those of us who are disadvantaged. So it's not about male-female debates. This is where I want us to shift the conversation from.
Okay. Well, Saturday, they will troop out in the states, and we'll see the people elect governors in 28 states, and we'll see the state assemblies also have people who run. But again, it's been said that for the state legislature, a lot needs to go into building capacity, because it would seem that at the national level, the legislature carries a lot more than the states, where actually, which should be the reverse. How do the people now align themselves to realizing the importance of the state legislature, and not just they go out and vote for the governors, and they say, well, the governors, and they will also take along with them the state legislature, because that's where it is. Look at the question of constitutional amendment. Everything dies at the state level.
Yeah. Yes, but these things die at the state level because the governors are too powerful at that level.
All right.
So I think that the people too need to be empowered in terms of education, to appreciate that they need to put in representatives that can hold these governors to account. We know in so many of these states, I don't want to mention names, where, you know, the speakers tend to be at the beck and call of the governors, and where they put up any resistance, you know, they give the short shrift to them and get some other speaker who takes over. So we need to educate our people to know that these positions are the ones that are closest to them. They are key to bringing development to them and to holding the executive to account, and they need therefore to vote in quality people. Right. Because if you vote in quality people, then they will demand that certain things are done. But if you vote in people who are pliant, who are pliable, who can be manipulated by the governor, or who can easily be bought over, you know, then you should change yourself. So we need to go back and really educate our local people to appreciate they need to put in quality people.
All right, we have only a few minutes left to go, so we'll just begin to take your closing comments as quickly as we can. If Ali Gaby is still with us, yes, I wonder if he's still there via Zoom from Paris. If you're there, maybe you can just give us your closing comments quickly as we round off. What's your final word to INEC and the voting public?
No, it's simple. The message is simple. For the public, we must understand that we are citizens, not subjects. And therefore, as citizens, we have rights. We have roles to play in building and crafting the nation state of our dreams. Then the second one also is, I recall when the Not Too Young to Run bill was muted, and civil society took it head on, and it was passed into law. I think we should complement that, not too poor to run. If we leave it at not too young to run and you're still too poor to run, then we'll still be talking about lack of political inclusivity, etc., etc. And lastly, again, Mr. Stoba, I will say this again. I've been a fan, and thank you very much for having me on your show. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Aliu Gaby, Senior Security Advisor to the Minister of Interior and National Coordinator, Security Governance Initiation, SGI, who joined us from Paris via Zoom. Thank you. Right. Well, Paul James.
I think for me the first to do is to answer that question of whether or not elections will happen on Saturday, because of course, the current legal battle, especially whether INEC will be able to assess the beavers before Saturday, because INEC will need to reconfigure the beavers. I know INEC have approached the court to seek the court's permission to do that. So I hope that is resolved quickly and not so that for us, especially
bill to be resolved on Wednesday, later today.
Oh, sure, of course.
Right. So, Dr. Bukhtari Imam.
I'll say this very quickly. In the words of Chairman Mao, he said, and I quote, that all reactionaries are paper tigers. And by reactionaries, he's referring to leaders, public office holders. And he said all reactionaries are paper tigers, but that from a long-term point of view, the real power belongs to the ordinary people. Nigerians must realize, and I am sure they are, especially with the conduct of election as we are witnessing currently. Nigerians are no longer docile. People are beginning to ask questions. Nigerians need to go out there and note that the coming election is, if not more important as the election that has just gone. Because like I said, no meaningful development can come to this country without the input of the subnationals. And so whoever you're electing as your governor and State House of Assembly member must be somebody who has something to deliver as far as governance is concerned. Because again, as they say, bad governance is like a stray bullet. It doesn't pick and choose.
Well, I will align myself with him. We have 1,201 seats that are up for grabs on that election against 496 that took place on the 25th of May. So in terms of number, in terms of quantum, in terms of proximity to the local people, these elections to me are even more important. And they are likely to be keenly contested, given the fact that so many people were demystified by the conduct of the presidential and the National Assembly elections.
All right, so thank you very much. Jitink Dazang, former Director of Voter Education and Publicity, INEC. Thank you for being here. Dr. Bukhtari Imam, Dean, Faculty of Communication, Management and Social Sciences, Penn Resource University, Gombe. Thank you so much for your thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
And Paul James, Yaga Africa, we appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Right. And thank you too for being part of the program tonight. Unfortunately, the phones didn't work tonight, and that's something we have to work on. Make sure that we have them up and running next Tuesday. Much better than the Beavers would perform, I can assure you that. So thank you once again for being part of this program. Next week, we'll reach you again on NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stober. Continue to stay safe.